right, so today we're going to do a deep dive into The Mom Test by Rob Fitzpatrick.
Okay.
And this book is kind of all about how do you get good feedback from your customers. You'd think that'd be pretty straightforward, like, talk to people, get their opinions, and boom,
Hmm.
you're ready to go. But as Fitzpatrick points out, it's actually a lot trickier than it sounds. There's
Right.
a reason why so many founders end up building products that nobody wants.
Well, yeah, and I think it's really interesting here, the sort of psychology of it. We as humans, we're just wired to be polite, especially to someone that's like, you know, brimming with passion for their idea. We don't want to rain on their parade. So we tend to kind of sugarcoat our feedback, even if we're not truly interested.
Right, it's that like classic mom scenario.
Yeah.
She's always going to love your macaroni art, even if it looks like a deranged rainbow threw up on construction paper.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's the danger, right? You get lulled into this false sense of validation by all the great ideas and they go, we'll use that. But then you launch and crickets.
So how do we avoid falling into this trap? How do we get past the surface level niceties and like really uncover the raw, unfiltered truth about what our customers actually need?
Well, that's where the mom test comes in. It's not just about asking questions, it's about asking the right questions.
Hmm.
The questions that cut through the fluff and get to the heart of like their actual experiences and motivations.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these magical questions.
So the first rule of the mom test is talk about their life, not your idea. The moment you start pitching your concept, you're already biasing the conversation. People will instinctively try to be supportive, even if they secretly think your idea is bonkers.
Right, because nobody wants to be the jerk that bursts someone's entrepreneurial bubble.
Right. So instead of saying like, hey, check out my revolutionary app that's going to change the world, you focus on understanding their world first. So ask them about their routines, their challenges, their aspirations. Get them talking about their life and then just listen. Like your life depends on it.
It sounds like a radical shift in mindset for most founders, because most founders are like so excited about their idea that they just want to share it with the world. But you're saying it's more about like holding back, almost like we're playing detective or something.
Exactly. You're trying to uncover clues, gather evidence, piece together the puzzle of their ids. And just like a good detective wouldn't reveal their theories too early, you don't want to bias the investigation by like introducing your idea prematurely.
Okay, so rule number one,
Yeah.
talk about their life, not your idea.
Yeah.
Got it. What's next?
All right. So rule number 2 is all about asking about specifics in the past, instead of generalities or opinions about the future.
Oh, okay. So instead of saying, would you use an app that did X? It's more like, tell me about the last time you encountered this problem. What did you do?
Spot on. You're tapping into their actual experiences, their proven behaviors, not their hypothetical intentions. Because people love to make promises about what they would do in the future, but their past actions are a far more reliable indicator of their true needs.
I can see how this would help weed out the folks that are just being polite versus the ones that are actually like genuinely grappling with a problem.
Yeah. And that leads us to the third rule: talk less and listen more. I know it sounds obvious, but it's so easy to get caught up in explaining your brilliant idea or trying to steer the conversation in a certain direction.
Oh, I've been there. You get so excited that you basically end up monologuing for like 20 minutes and barely give the other person a chance to speak.
We've all been there. But remember, you're not there to give a presentation. You're there to gather intel. The more you talk, the less you learn. Let the customer do the talking and really listen to what they have to say. Often the most valuable insights come from the things they don't say, the subtle hints and hesitations that reveal their true feelings.
Yeah, it's like those hidden object games, where you have to scan the scene for those tiny little details. You might think you've seen everything, but then you zoom in and you realize there's a tiny little key hidden behind a flower pot that unlocks the whole mystery.
Exactly. Customer conversations are like those hidden object games.
Yeah.
You have to be observant, patient, and willing to dig deeper to find the real treasures.
Okay, so we've got the 3 rules down.
Okay.
Talk about their life, ask about specifics in the past, and talk less, listen more. But what about the actual questions themselves? How do we know if we're asking good questions versus bad questions?
That's where things get really interesting. Fitzpatrick gives tons of examples of both good and bad questions, and he breaks down the psychology behind why they work or why they don't.
So let's start with some of the baddies. I bet we've all asked these at some point. Give me an example of a classic mom test fail.
Oh, there are so many. But one that immediately springs to mind is, do you think this is a good idea?
Ah, yes, the classic.
It seems harmless enough, but
But it's basically asking for a compliment, and we already know how unreliable those can be.
Exactly. You're inviting them to stroke your ego instead of giving you honest feedback. And remember, only the market can truly determine if your idea is good.
Hey, that one's definitely going on the do not ask list. What's another common bad question pitfall?
Okay, so another common pitfall is asking hypothetical or future focused questions like, would you buy a product that did X? Or how much would you pay for this? Again, these questions tap into people's imagined selves, their aspirational desires, not their actual behavior.
Right, so they might say, oh yeah, I totally pay $100 for a gadget that does my laundry and makes me coffee. But in reality, they'd balk at spending more than $50 on anything that isn't a video game or a pizza.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to anchor your questions in the present reality. So instead of asking, would you buy this? Ask, how do you currently solve this problem? Or what tools or workarounds are you using right now?
I see, I see. So it's about grounding the conversation in the concrete of the tangible, not the hypothetical or aspirational.
Exactly. You're moving away from vague promises and opinions towards real world behaviors and experiences. And that's where the real gold lies.
Okay, we've covered some of the bad question traps. Let's flip the script and talk about some examples of good questions, the ones that can actually unlock those valuable insights.
One of my favorites is, what are the implications of that? This seemingly simple question can uncover a wealth of information about the severity of a problem and its impact on their life.
Oh, yeah, I see that. So, for example, someone says, yeah, I struggle with scheduling meetings. Instead of just nodding sympathetically, I could say, what are the implications of that? Does it lead to missed deadlines, frustrated clients, missed opportunities?
Exactly. You're pushing them to think deeper about the consequences of the problem, how it affects their work, their relationships, their bottom line. This helps you gauge whether it's just a minor annoyance or a major pain point that's worth solving.
Another good question you mentioned earlier is, talk me through the last time that happened. Why is this so effective?
Because it forces them to recall a specific instance, which often triggers memories and emotions that wouldn't surface if you just asked a general question. They're not just theorizing, they're reliving an experience, and that can lead to some incredibly valuable insights.
So instead of asking, do you ever get frustrated with customer service? I could ask, tell me about the last time you had a frustrating experience with customer service. What happened? How did it make you feel?
Exactly. You're inviting them to share a story, and stories are powerful. They tap into our emotions, they reveal our values, and they often uncover details and nuances that wouldn't emerge from a more general inquiry.
Okay, this is all starting to click. Now I'm curious about how to handle those situations where despite our best efforts, we still encounter bad data. You know those compliments, generalities, future-focused opinions that Fitzpatrick calls fluff?
Ah, yes, fluff the bane of every entrepreneur's existence.
So how do we deal with those well-meaning but ultimately unhelpful comments? The ones that can lead us astray.
Well, we'll delve into those strategies in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, sounds good. I'm ready to tackle those fluffy monsters head on. So before we went to the break, we were talking about, how to ask the right questions, like the questions that help you avoid all those false positives
Yeah.
when you're trying to figure out if your business idea is actually going to work.
Yeah, the fluff monsters.
Exactly, the fluff monsters.
Those like vague, generic responses that sound positive on the surface, but like they don't actually give you any concrete information to work with.
Right, like when someone says, "Oh, I totally use that,"
Mm.
but then you ask them, "Okay, like give me an example," and they just go blank.
Exactly. And Fitzpatrick actually gives some really good tactics for dealing with this. And the key here is like, you're not trying to shut down the conversation or make the person feel bad. You're just trying to gently guide them towards providing more useful information.
It's like you're a conversational archaeologist, carefully brushing away all the dirt and debris to get to the real artifacts beneath.
I love that analogy. And one of the most effective tools in your archaeological kit is the power of anchoring. Remember how we talked about focusing on specifics in the past? Well, anchoring is all about taking those vague, fluffy statements and grounding them in concrete reality.
Okay, so for example, let's say someone says, "Yeah, I usually struggle with managing my to-do list." Instead of just being like, "Oh yeah, me too," I could say something like, "Tell me about the last time you felt totally overwhelmed by your to-do list. Like what happened? What tools were you using? What made it so difficult?"
Yeah, exactly. You're taking that vague, usually, and anchoring it to a specific event in their past. This forces them to recall the details, the emotions, the specific challenges they faced. And that's where the real insights start to emerge.
It's like taking a blurry photograph and bringing it into sharp focus. Suddenly you could see all the details that were hidden before.
Another tactic for handling fluff is to dig beneath the surface of ideas. Often people will offer suggestions or feature requests that sound great on the surface, but they're not actually addressing the root cause of the problem.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. It might look like you're doing something, but you're not actually solving the real problem.
Right, so when someone offers an idea, resist the urge to immediately jump on board and start building it. Instead, channel your inner 5-year-old and keep asking why.
I love that. Like, I think you should add a feature that lets me track my sleep patterns. Okay, why is that important to you? Well, because I want to improve my sleep quality. Okay, but why is it so important to improve your sleep quality? Well, because I'm always tired and it's affecting my work.
Exactly. You're peeling back the layers of the onion to get to the core motivation behind the idea. And once you understand the why, you can start to explore solutions that actually address the root cause, rather than just treating the symptoms.
This is brilliant. It's like you're being a therapist for your customers, helping them uncover their underlying needs and desires.
And speaking of uncovering needs, let's talk about one of the most crucial aspects of the mom test: seeking commitment. As you move further along in developing your product, it's essential to start pushing for concrete actions, things that actually demonstrate real buy-in.
So we're not just looking for head nods and compliments anymore. We want to see some skin in the game.
Exactly. Early on, it might be a small commitment, like agreeing to a follow-up meeting, providing feedback on a prototype, or connecting you with someone in their network who might be interested. But as you gain traction, you can start asking for bigger commitments, like pre-orders deposits or even letters of intent.
So how do we go about asking for these commitments without sounding like, pushy or salesy?
The key is to frame it in a way that benefits them. Instead of saying like, hey, can you pre-order my product? Try something like, we're looking for a few early adopters to help us refine the product before we launch it to the public. Would you be interested in being one of our beta testers?
Oh, I like that. It positions them as a valued partner, not just a customer.
And it gives them a sense of exclusivity and early access, which can be a really powerful motivator.
Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about finding conversations.
Hmm.
Because, even if you're a master of asking the right questions, it's not going to do you much good if you're not talking to the right people.
Yeah. This is where things can get a little tricky.
It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack, especially if you're targeting a niche market.
Well, Fitzpatrick has a whole arsenal of tactics for finding those needles, and he really encourages us to be creative and resourceful. It's not always about formal meetings or structured interviews. Sometimes the most valuable insights come from those unexpected encounters and casual conversations.
This is what he calls keeping it casual, right? Like, striking up a conversation with someone in line at the coffee shop or at an industry event.
Exactly. You never know who you might bump into.
Yeah.
And even if it's not your ideal customer, they might know someone who is. Or they might have valuable insights into the market that you're targeting.
So how do we turn those casual encounters into meaningful conversations?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be that weirdo who's like grilling strangers about their deepest business needs while they're just trying to get their caffeine fix.
You don't have to go full on interrogation mode. Just be genuinely curious and approach it from a place of wanting to learn. You could say something like, hey, I overheard you mentioning that you work in the, whatever industry. I'm really interested in learning more about, specific problem. Would you be open to chatting for a few minutes?
Yeah, that's a great approach. It's not pushy, it's not demanding, and it gives them an easy out if they're not interested.
And remember, you don't need to get all the answers in one conversation. The goal is just to plant a seed, make a connection, and see if there's potential for a more in-depth conversation down the road.
Okay, so we've got casual conversations covered. What about more structured approaches like organizing meetups or speaking at industry events?
Those can be incredibly effective ways to connect with a large group of potential customers. And to kind of position yourself as a thought leader in your space.
It's like you're creating a magnet for your ideal customer. They're already interested in the topic, so they're more likely to be engaged and open to sharing their thoughts and experiences.
Exactly. And when you're speaking or leading a discussion, you have a platform to share your insights, demonstrate your expertise, and spark conversations that can lead to valuable connections.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've talked about casual conversations, meetups, speaking engagements. What about more traditional methods like cold emailing or even gasp cold calling?
I know those can feel a bit daunting, but Fitzpatrick argues that they can still be effective tools, especially when you're targeting a very specific niche or trying to reach high-level decision makers.
Okay, but how do we make those cold outreach attempts less well cold? Nobody likes getting those like generic spammy emails or calls from strangers.
Yeah, the key is to personalize your message and focus on providing value. Do your research, understand their needs, and position yourself as someone who can help them solve a specific problem.
So instead of sending out a generic, hey, check out my amazing product email, I should tailor it to their specific industry and highlight how my product can address their unique challenges.
Exactly. And if you're cold calling, be prepared with a concise and compelling pitch, one that highlights the value you can provide. Don't waste their time with a long-winded introduction. Get straight to the point and make it clear why they should care.
This is all great advice. I'm starting to feel a lot more confident about approaching potential customers and having those conversations. But there's one thing I'm still a bit stuck on. How do we choose the right customers to talk to in the first place? I mean, not everyone's going to be a good fit for our product, right?
You're absolutely right. And that brings us to one of the most powerful concepts in mom test, customer slicing. It's
Hmm.
about going beyond basic demographics and psychographics and really digging deep to understand your ideal customer's behaviors, motivations, and underlying needs.
Okay, customer slicing. I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this.
It's like taking a broad segment of the market, let's say like people who are interested in fitness, and you continually slice it down into smaller and smaller subgroups until you have this crystal clear picture of exactly who you're targeting.
So instead of trying to appeal to everyone who's ever like thought about going for a jog, I might slice it down to like busy professionals who are struggling to fit exercise into their hectic schedules, but who are also highly motivated to improve their health and well-being.
Exactly. And by understanding this specific subgroup's needs, pain points, aspirations, you can tailor your product, your messaging, even your customer conversations to really resonate with them.
This is making so much sense. It's like going from using a butter knife to a scalpel. You're getting much more precise and targeted in your approach.
And that level of precision is essential for building a product that people truly love and are willing to pay for.
Now, I know we talked about note-taking earlier, but I'm curious to dive a little deeper into that. What are some of the best practices for capturing those valuable insights during and after those customer conversations?
Well, Fitzpatrick's a big advocate for having a system in place, but he also stresses that it doesn't need to be overly complicated. The most important thing is to capture the key takeaways and to make sure you can easily refer back to them later.
So whether it's a simple notebook, a spreadsheet, or, some fancy note-taking app, just find what works for you and stick with it.
Exactly, and don't just jot down random thoughts. Try to organize your notes in a way that makes sense to you. You could use bullet points, headings, or even color coding to highlight key themes or insights.
And what about sharing those notes with the team? I mean, it doesn't do much good if those insights are just languishing in my notebook, right?
Absolutely. Fitzpatrick's a big believer in transparency and collaboration. He encourages teams to review their notes together, discuss the key takeaways, and use those insights to inform their product development and marketing decisions.
This is so important. It prevents those like learning bottlenecks where one person, usually the CEO or founder, is the sole keeper of all the customer knowledge.
And it ensures that everyone on the team is aligned on the customer's needs and that those insights are being actively integrated into the product development process.
Okay, this has been incredibly insightful. I'm already feeling much more equipped to have those conversations with potential customers. But there's one last thing I'm curious about. How do we keep the momentum going? Like, how do we stay motivated, especially when we're facing rejection or hearing negative feedback?
That's a great question, and it's one that Fitzpatrick addresses head on in the mom test. He reminds us that setbacks and failures are an inevitable part of the entrepreneurial journey. It's not about avoiding them, it's about learning from them and using them to fuel your growth.
So instead of getting discouraged when someone says no,
Yeah.
we should view it as an opportunity to learn and refine our approach.
Exactly. Every no is a step closer to a yes. And often those no's are packed with valuable information that can help you improve your product, your messaging, or even your target market.
He also talks about the importance of celebrating small wins right. Like even if we haven't landed a major deal or launched our product yet, we should acknowledge those small steps forward that are keeping us moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. Celebrate those successful customer conversations, those aha moments when you uncover a valuable insight, those small commitments that indicate growing interest.
Yeah, those small wins, they add up and they help you stay motivated, especially when the going gets tough.
Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's touch on one more crucial aspect of customer conversations, framing the meeting. Even when you've secured a meeting with a potential customer, it's important to set the stage for a productive and insightful exchange.
Yeah, I can see how that would be important. You don't want to just walk in and start peppering them with questions like you're some kind of marketing inquisitor.
Right. It's about creating a collaborative and comfortable environment where they feel valued and heard. And Fitzpatrick offers some really good advice for framing the conversation in a way that encourages that kind of openness and honesty.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some of his key recommendations for setting the right tone?
First and foremost, avoid using language like interview or pitch. Those words can make people feel like they're being put on the spot or that you're just trying to sell them something.
So instead of saying, I'd like to interview you about your experiences with project management software, I could say something like, I'm working on a project in the productivity space, and I'd love to get your insights on the challenges you face with managing projects.
Exactly. It positions you as someone who's genuinely interested in learning from them and who values their expertise. And it creates a much more relaxed and conversational atmosphere.
He also talks about the importance of clearly articulating your vision and the purpose of the meeting, right?
Right. She recommends using a framework he calls Vision Framing Weakness Pedestal Ask. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's a really effective way to structure your opening remarks.
Okay, break it down for me. How does this framework work in practice?
So first, you briefly share your vision for the problem you're solving and the impact you hope to make. Then you frame the purpose of the meeting, explaining why you're talking to them specifically and what you hope to learn. Next, you acknowledge your own weakness, the areas where you need their expertise and guidance.
I like this. It shows humility and vulnerability, which can actually make you more relatable and trustworthy.
Exactly. Then you put them on a pedestal, acknowledging their expertise and experience in this area. And finally, you make the ask, clearly stating what you're hoping to gain from the conversation, whether it's feedback on a concept, insights into their workflow, or even just, a connection to someone in their network.
This framework is brilliant. It's like a roadmap for having a successful customer conversation.
And it ensures that everyone is on the same page from the start, which sets the stage for a much more productive and insightful exchange.
Okay, I'm feeling much more confident about framing those conversations. But there's one last thing I'm curious about. We've talked a lot about finding the right customers. But what happens if we accidentally talk to the wrong people?
That's a great question, and it's something that every entrepreneur faces at some point. But don't worry. Fitzpatrick has some excellent advice for handling those situations. Extracting value even from conversations that might not seem immediately relevant.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are some of his key strategies for navigating those wrong customer encounters?
Well, we'll explore those tactics in the final part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
So last time we were talking about what happens when you end up talking to the wrong customers.
Right, because it's inevitable. You're going to have some conversations that just aren't quite the right fit.
Yeah, like you put yourself out there, you try to connect with people, and sometimes you end up talking to someone who's not really your target audience. Or maybe they're just not ready to buy into your solution.
And Fitzpatrick actually encourages us to view those as valuable learning opportunities.
Okay, I'm curious, how can we extract value from a conversation that might seem like kind of a dead end?
Well, for one thing, it helps you refine your understanding of your target market. Maybe you realize that your initial assumptions about your ideal customer were a little bit off, or that there are certain segments you should avoid altogether.
So it's like a process of elimination, helping you narrow down your focus and get even more clarity on who you should be talking to.
Exactly. And even if the person you're talking to isn't your ideal customer, they might have valuable insights into the market or the problem you're solving. They might be able to connect you with someone who is a good fit. Or they might offer a perspective that you hadn't considered before.
It's like those wrong turns that you sometimes take on a road trip. They might not get you to your destination any faster, but they often lead to unexpected discoveries and scenic detours that enrich the journey.
I love that analogy. And speaking of journeys, let's talk about how to keep the momentum going and avoid getting discouraged when the going gets tough. Because let's face it, talking to customers can be challenging, especially when you're facing rejection or hearing negative feedback.
Yeah, I think every entrepreneur has experienced that sinking feeling. Like when you pour your heart and soul into a pitch only to be met with blank stares or polite disinterest.
It's natural to feel discouraged, but Fitzpatrick reminds us that setbacks and failures are an inevitable part of the journey. It's not about avoiding them, it's about learning from them and using them to fuel your growth.
He actually encourages us to embrace bad news. Why is that?
Because those moments when you realize your assumptions were wrong or that your product isn't resonating, those can be incredibly valuable learning opportunities.
It's like a wake-up call, forcing you to re-examine your approach and make necessary adjustments.
Exactly. And often the most painful feedback is the most valuable. It helps you identify blind spots, uncover hidden needs, and course correct before you invest too much time and resources in the wrong direction.
This is so important. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of our own ideas,
Yeah.
but we need to be open to the possibility that we might be wrong, or that our initial assumptions might need some tweaking.
And that's why talking to customers is so crucial. It's not just about validation, it's about discovery. It's about constantly seeking feedback, testing our assumptions, and refining our approach based on real world insights.
And he also talks about the importance of celebrating those small wins.
Right.
Like even if we haven't landed a major deal or launched our product yet, we should acknowledge those small steps forward that are keeping us moving in the right direction.
Absolutely. Celebrate those successful customer conversations. Celebrate those aha moments when you uncover a valuable insight, those small commitments that indicate growing interest.
It's like giving yourself a little pat on the back for every mile marker you pass on a long journey. It helps you stay motivated, and it reminds you that you're making progress, even if the destination still seems far away.
Now, as we wrap up our deep dive into the mom test, I want to leave you with a challenge. Remember that thought provoking question we posed earlier? If you could ask just one question to a potential customer that would reveal the most valuable insight, what would that question be?
I love that question. It really forces you to distill all the principles of the mom test into a single laser-focused inquiry.
Think about what information is most crucial for your business and craft a question that cuts through the fluff, avoids hypotheticals, and focuses on your customers' real world experiences.
And remember, there's no right or wrong answer here. The most important thing is to keep asking questions, keep listening, and keep refining your understanding of your customers' needs.
Because ultimately, that's the key to building a product that people truly love, and that solves a real problem in their lives.
Well said. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the mom test. We hope you found these insights valuable, and we encourage you to put what you've learned into practice.
Go out there armed with the principles of the mom test and start having those meaningful conversations that can transform your business.
And remember, the journey of discovering the right product is an exciting one. It's full of unexpected twists and turns. Embrace the process, be open to learning, and never stop talking to your customers. They hold the keys to unlocking your business's true potential.
Until next time, happy learning.